welcome to 10 Questions, my friend.
Jimmy, thank you for having me on. I'm super excited to do this with you today. This is by far one of the best segments on YouTube to get to know different people on YouTube, man, different collectibles. So thank you so much.
Oh no, I appreciate that so much, man. We were talking off camera before, and I told you I'm a true fan. I'm a defect. I am 100% a defect. And I love you, Matt and Guy, and Gary comes on, and you have some various guests. So I'm really excited to have you on. And the first question, and this is not even question one, but I was just interested to know, like, DaButcha, is that a nickname? Is that I don't know, a last name?
So it's so funny. When online gaming started, that was my online screen name because I was in fact a butcher. I used to cut meat for a living. So I was like, what better name? It sounds cool, right? And
Yeah.
it's what I do for a living. So the butcher, and it just stuck. When I got onto social media, I just kept it.
Cool. Love that, man. That's awesome. All right. So, question one, and question one is the same for everybody that comes on here. And that's what got you into comics.
All right. So what got me into comics was growing up. I grew up in a city, right next to the Bronx, called Mount Vernon, and I was fortunate, man, because on my block, on both sides of my block, I had a comic book shop. And in those comic book shop, it wasn't just comics; it was sports cards, what were big, in the '80s and '90s. I was born in '81, so it was a lot of basketball cards and baseball cards and all types of collectibles and comics. But not only that, they had arcade games in there. It was the era of, when Street Fighter 2 came out and everybody was lining up to play. And then we got a little Mortal Kombat. So these two comic shops were a hangout for all the kids in the neighborhood. We used to go with a pocket full of quarters and we used to play video games and we used to buy comic books. And, everybody would talk about their different comics and stuff and their different sports cards. So that's pretty much what got me into collecting comics, just seeing what was coming out every week and what everybody was talking about. Different people collect different things, even as kids. Different characters stands out to different people. So, you couldn't be left out back then. That was the thing growing up. Now comic book shops are scarce. You barely find them, which is a shame. And I wish my son had the same thing I had, but that's what got me into comics, man. Just hanging out with all the fellas from the block and looking at different books,
Oh,
different
that's awesome.
covers.
Like, I'm so jealous of that. Like, when we were growing up, even right now, where I sit right now, the closest comic book shop is an hour from me. And where my office is, where I go every day and work, it's about 5 minutes from there. But, so I have easy access to it. But if I wanted to go right now, and when I was a kid, really it was the supermarket. They had a magazine
Yep.
rack and they would have a few comics on there. You could read a few of those. And I've told it on here 1,000 times. I had an uncle who traded at the flea market, and he sold ball cards. He was doing card breaks before card breaks even existed.
Right.
He was doing that stuff at the flea markets. He had all kinds of comic books for sale, and that's where I read most of my books, was sitting on his flea market table, and he would let me grab anything I wanted and read. And so that's, really, I didn't have access to it to, like, kind of, read and kind of keep up. That's how I got into it.
Yeah, and you know what? It's so funny you said that because, like, we know in the early '90s, comic books were being printed at an all-time high, and shops were popping up all over the place. And then it just kind of like a lot of trades nowadays. Like, you think about trades that you don't see as much that maybe your parents seen, like a shoemaker or a shoe repairman or something like that. It just tends to fade away. But now it looks like the collectible market is coming back, and hopefully we see more comic book shops opening up.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. I said it is. It's been a nice revival of the hobby, and I hope it continues on. I really do. So, question two is, I actually heard that you worked in a comic book store at one time, and I was interested to know, because I think every comic collector probably thinks that that's the greatest job ever, right? To actually work in a comic book store, and you've got access to all these comics all the time. But what is it really like to work in a comic shop?
So I worked there during elementary school, like fifth and sixth grade, in both shops. Like I said, I had two shops on either side. You walk out my building, to the left was the Underworld, to the right was Spidey's Dugout. Spidey's Dugout was more of a sports store that sold comic books, hence the name Spidey's Dugout. And what I would do there was I would just open packs up and sort cards for sets, because there was collectors back then that would just want to buy a set of Topps or Donruss baseball cards, 1 through 300, whatever the case may be. So I would sit there and just sort cards. I did that for a couple of years, and then I got more into the comic book aspect of collecting, and I went and I worked at the Underworld, which was, they were kind of competitors, but kind of cool. So it was, pretty much, it was chill, man. And I would go there, and I would, on New Comic Book Day, I would set up all the new comic books. I would grab whatever issues I want. We would talk about what was hot, and it was great, man, because the owners of the store were big comic book fans too. It wasn't just like a businessman opening up a shop. They were actual collectors that loved the hobby, and they loved reading the stories. And you would just sit in there and BS about comic books. And, you get paid scraps when you're a kid, especially elementary school and middle school. And I would spend all my money there anyway. So maybe they were businessmen in a sense, because they knew all that money was coming back to them anyway.
So you were a kid. So really, I mean, I bet it was like Oz. I bet you were in there like, oh, all the time. There's just books everywhere.
And when comic books would come in, they would just come in raw in stacks with like plastic bands around them. So it's tough. And like seeing that growing up in a comic book store, and then seeing people getting, 9/8 and stuff, even from books from the 90s, is shocking, man, because the way they were shipped back then and handled, and like no one knew about grading, was the last thing on anyone's mind back in the day. They just wanted to read comic books. And I'm very OCD with keeping my stuff in pristine condition, so I would always put my book in the backboard in the sleeve, but still read it 1,000 times, but I never thought about that. So even like when I see books from the 90s that get 9/8, I'm still surprised, man, because everything was just thrown on the floor and slapped on a shelf.
That's great. And it's something you said too, like you were, it was more of a trading card store. So I still do trading cards too. Like I have a Cygnus, like I collect everything. So, trading cards are still a part of what I do, in my day to day as far as a hobby. And I was just thinking when you said that, how you would crack packs and, and sort them into sets, because that was really the big thing back then. Is it was really just a base set. And then as time went on, especially when you got in the 90s, there would be some smaller sets that would go with those. Can you imagine that? Do you keep up with it at all today?
Sports cards, I don't. I'm a big sports fan. I love sports, but comics is my fix. That's what I collect. I watch box breaks and I watch stuff like that, and I'm like, wow, this is crazy.
The prices are just insane, man.
Yeah,
I said I couldn't imagine breaking one out to do a set.
Yeah, now 3 cards come in a pack nowadays. They're like a brick. They're about this big. When I was young and collecting cards, it was like Shaq's rookie year, Alonzo Mourning's rookie year, and Shaq was a big draw back then, and of course Jordan and all those guys were always around. But I think it really hit big for basketball, at least, is when Shaq came onto the scene and everybody was grabbing those cards. But I don't buy sports cards. It's so funny because I'm a diehard Raider fan, and I have people send me Raider cards all the time, which I appreciate and I save, but it's just not a collectible I'm into.
Well, it's hard to collect those these days, honestly. Like I've had to actually, it's so expensive. I mean, like if I like to collect the higher end cards, right? The Flawlesses, the National Treasures, cards like that. A case of those, which has 10 cards, people, 10, is about $3,000. And that's not, I said a case, that's for one suitcase, and has 10 cards. A case is 2 of those suitcases. That's 20 cards total, $6,000. And some of them are even higher than that. It's insane.
Yeah. That's crazy, man. What I did collect a lot of, though, I was more into like the Marvel and DC cards back in the day, which surged in like a year and a half ago. Everybody was looking for them, and those were still like the Marvel Universe cards. You could still find unopened boxes at flea markets, but before that for like $10. And I remember as a kid being in the comic book store, being that I worked there, I would feel every pack to see which pack was thicker that had that hologram card. So that was another fun aspect. And then, Magic came in and all that other stuff I was never really into, but that was a big draw for comic book shops too, because you had a lot of people into like the Magic card games. And then I know that developed into like Pokemon and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But I was already, out of that phase by the time Pokemon came out. But I wish I didn't, because guys are making, huge money off these Pokemon cards now.
Yeah, they are. So are you kind of like the rest of us where, you collected young and then kind of hit that point in your life, as I like to say, you discovered beer and girls. And then you kind of step away, for a while. And then two, you're broke at some point when you get up there, you're trying to get your career started. And then you kind of come back. Was that the case for you, or have you collected just always?
So I'm a big Punisher guy. Always loved Punisher. I think it's something about being an 80s baby, watching Transformers and G.I. Joe and all these different shows that involve guns and, playing Army and Manhunted as a kid. Like, there's a issue. My first comic book I bought was an issue of Punisher Volume 2. It's issue 45, where Frank Castle's standing on top of a cab and he's pointing a gun down at like some guy robbing a cab driver. And I'm like, oh, this is the comic for me. I always kept up on Punisher, always. Everything else I faded away from. Working in there in the 90s, we saw the Image run, right? We saw the McFarlane Spider-Man run, which was something that was eye-opening for me, because I've never seen art like Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man run. When that first #1 issue came out, working in a comic book store, that was the draw then. Like, everybody's like, I have to have this comic book. They had the regular, the regular cover A, they had the silver, they had the gold, they had the platinum. That was huge for me. His artwork changed my idea of comic book art. So that being said, working at the store, I grabbed everything. When he came out with Spawn and Image came out, and all these artists went from Marvel and DC to Image. You had Liefeld, you had Jim Lee, you had Todd McFarlane. All these major guys hopped over to Image. It was the hottest thing in the 90s for a comic book store to have. And they came out with like Cyberforce and Deathblow and The Max and Gen 13 and all these awesome art covers. Everybody then, we all know it in the community, guys. Everyone's like, this is the cash cow. This is what you need to grab to make millions of dollars when you're like 40 years old. And I bought everything, man. I loved it all, but I got away from all of that. Like you said, it was time to drink in the woods and hunt down chicks. I put everything on the back burner except for Punisher. I always grab Punisher. And I take pride in saying I own every issue of every Punisher run that there is, excluding the variants and all that stuff, because that gets kind of wacky and expensive. But every Punisher issue I have, I'm up to date on Frank Castle for sure. So that was always a part of my life. You go from buying a Heineken to a Bud Light if you got to get a Punisher issue.
That's
you know
right.
what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. Yes. So question 3, and one of the reasons I'm such a big fan of yours is you are very similar to me in you're a reader. You like the stories. You're really a story guy. And I was just interested, from one reader to another, like what makes a good story for you? Like what really draws you in?
All right. You definitely need a good plot line. You definitely need a good story, and you definitely need good artwork, because it all has to mesh together for me. Like, I read, I'm a big omnibus collector too. I go back and buy omnibus because it's a whole collected story in one book. And I just sit down here and, peace and quiet, and I read through my stories. So it's tough, man. Like, everybody's like, oh, what's your favorite, age of comic books to collect and read and all that? But it's so different, because the modern stuff you read now is so much different. Like, if you pick up a FF1 and start reading FF1, 1 through 30, it's just a different era of time and different comic book reading. I'm a big story guy. I love it. Infinity Gauntlet, like, I bash the MCU a lot if you guys watch, because it's just not the same, man. Like, Infinity War is so much different when you read it in the comics than you watch it on the big screen. Like, don't get me wrong, great movie, but the comic books so much better, so much more in depth, So reading comic books, listen, if you collect, there's plenty of sites you could go on to read comic books. Go back and read your favorite runs, man. I can't emphasize that enough, especially in this hobby. And that's
No,
where
absolutely.
that's where the speculation comes into play too. Because if you're a comic book reader and you start watching a show like Hawkeye or something like that, you know, hey, this is coming from the Fraction run. This, you know, I already know the characters, you know, so it goes hand in hand. I like watching it on TV. I like the shows in the movie, but to me, nothing better than sitting down and reading a good story arc.
No, absolutely, and I agree with you. It all kind of has to. I like, and when I say good art, like what I mean by that is I almost have to not see it in a sense. Like it can't distract me from what I'm reading. Like it's almost like watching a movie or reading a movie. You know what I'm saying? Where it's back there and you see it and it's adding to the overall experience. But if the art is
Yep.
whack, then I can't read the story. Like it drives me crazy.
Yeah, it doesn't mesh. And you know, everybody knows I always talk Marvel. I'm a big Punisher guy. My two favorite reads, man, are Jeff Johns' Green Lantern with The Darkest Night and Brightest Day. And my absolute favorite run of all time is Snyder and Capullo's Batman. Like, to me, that is like art and storytelling all meshed.
Yes.
Like, it's just great, man.
Yeah, that the Snyder really that run made me a huge Scott Snyder fan.
Yeah, me too.
And
Absolutely.
Capullo too, but because Snyder has a way of writing that I don't know, it just really speaks to me. And I agree with you 100%. That run, I think it was the New 52 run, right? 52 issues was just solid all the way through. I mean, from beginning to end, and that Jeff Johns run that you're talking about is phenomenal too. Do you have any other favorite, I guess, writers, you know, through time that you kind of go back and look for their stories?
I have, so that's hard to say. I like a bunch of different writers. I go by story arc, man. Like, there's writers that I like on one storyline and one arc and one series that I don't like on another.
Sure.
One is Rick Remender. His Uncanny X-Force was one of the best reads I ever read in my life, but I hated it when he did The Punisher. So I think it all depends on, you know, what the writer is thinking and the attachment he has to the character. I loved Kate's on Venom, the earlier issues. It
Sure.
kind of faded out because, you know, he's getting all types of projects thrown at him, and you kind of take your mind away from Eddie Brock and Venom and that, and you're thinking about the other stuff. But his setup for Eddie Brock was the best I've ever read. Like, you felt Eddie Brock as a person for the first time ever in comic books. So it's not really favorite writers, it's just favorite story arcs and, you know, series for me.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense, really. I mean, I guess it's really like I have some writers that I will like. I've recently, and which is funny, I recently was turned on to Jeff Lemire, and I hadn't read a whole lot of Jeff Lemire stuff. I interviewed one of the guys from Whack Comics, Lee, and he is a huge Jeff Lemire
Right.
fan, and
Yep.
so he and I were talking about that. So I went back and started reading some stories, and really kind of got turned on to him as a writer, and really enjoy a lot of his work.
Yeah, it's
So
great.
go
That's what's
ahead.
so great about the hobby too, man. Is like, you know, you have like people now. We're talking, you know, January 2022. People are bashing on Cates's Hulk, you know, but just give it a chance. Let it
Yeah.
develop a little bit. You can't go into issue 3 and bash the guy. You know, it's whatever works for you. That's what's awesome about this hobby. Like, you have people that are huge Claremont fans on the cosmic side. You got people that, you know, um like you said, love Jeff Lemire's universe and Jeff Johns. He's done some great stuff, and then he's done so not so great stuff. You
Sure.
know, Tom King, his Mr. Miracle was fantastic, and then, you know, him writing Batman, it didn't do it for me. So I
Yeah.
think it all how a writer goes on to a character and grasps that character.
No, that makes a ton of sense, really. All right. So, question 4 is, and you mentioned it just a second ago, is in reading, and you're trying to maybe do a little spec because you guys do some spec talk on the Defects channel. And you know, when I was talking to Matt, I asked him that question: is like, you know, what are you looking at when you're trying to determine what you think comes next? And I think, you know, what you said about reading the stories and having some knowledge of those stories makes a ton of sense when you're trying to figure out what they're going to do, you know, on Disney Plus or in the MCU on the big screen. Can you talk a little bit about some of your process and trying to determine what maybe a sleeper book is, or a new hot pick might be down the road?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm fortunate because I have Matt and I have a couple of other guys in the community like Universe X and Thorough that we're in a group chat, and we like to dissect everything, right? Everybody takes a little piece. So, um, for example, the Moon Knight series is coming out, right? The first thing I did, I grabbed my Moon Knight omnibus. I started from Werewolf by Night 32, and I read from there. And I keep reading and reading to see, okay, where could this go? Where could that go? You know, what characters make sense in today's world? Like, what characters will everybody adapt to? And you just take it from there. And, speculation is exactly what it is. It's speculation. And on Pressable Defects, we tell people before every episode that we do our defect spec, listen, we're not telling you to go out and get these books. These are books that we're grabbing, that we're sharing with you, that could possibly hit. And, sometimes they do hit. They have hit in the past, and then we missed on characters. But I think specking is an awesome part of the hobby, because it's like, hey, what's going to happen? Let's see if we're right. So what I like to do, listen, okay, we know Moon Knight's coming, right? I'll go and spec who is he associated with? Who are his allies? Who are his enemies? And then I just go from there. I'll look them up on Wikipedia. I'll read exactly what they have in common, or what their, alliance or their grudges against Moon Knight, and I'll go from there, man. It's just researching and doing your own investigations, comparing it with your friends, and just see where it takes it. It's fun, man.
Well, I think so too, because it was something, Matt kind of said something similar, to, you kind of take something and then you break it out. But as a reader, I think that would be a lot of fun. Like you said, you went back and you started with Moon Knight from the beginning, and then just
Right.
reading all the way through. And it's almost, I compare it to just being out hunting for comics. It's a treasure hunt, right? That's part of the fun, is striking gold. And if you can read a story and maybe deduce what might happen, in the future in one of these movies or one of these shows, it's like a treasure hunt, man. It's just, I mean, to me, that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's exactly what it's like. It's like a scavenger hunt. But see, that's what hurts me when I do on when I go on like Very Gary's reviews and stuff, and I review an episode. It's because I went back and read the books, and they were just so much better. Now the
Yeah.
show is in my face, and I'm like, oh, that's not what happened. This is what's supposed to happen. So, but I enjoy anything comic books, reading them or watching them. I just give my honest opinion. I like the stories being read better.
Now, that's one of the things that I picked up from you guys was, when Hawkeye came out, you guys were talking about the Matt Fraction run, and I hadn't read that. And so I went back and grabbed it and started reading it. I read it online, and it was great. And it was as close, because I've done the same thing where I've like watched the Infinity Gauntlet, like watch the movies and you go back and read it, and you're right, it's nothing the same.
Yeah,
Like it's completely different. The Hawkeye run was it was pretty close. It was as close as anything's been, I think, to what they did on Disney Plus.
Yeah, and they threw in a little bit of Daredevil issues that featured Echo in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I liked it. Listen, I like what Feige does, and I like what DC does too. There's not, and I'm going to get bashed in the comments here. Like Green Lantern, I didn't hate that movie. Like, hey, it's looking.
I didn't either.
You're watching Green Lantern on screen. It's cool, man. Was it a great movie? Nah, but did I enjoy it? Absolutely, man. It's a comic book character that I love on screen.
No, absolutely, man. Which I don't take things real serious. I don't know how, I tell people that, like, when I watch a movie, and let's just say Green Lantern, I'm looking to escape for a couple hours. And
Right.
if I can do that and watch one of my favorite comic book characters on screen, then I'm cool with it. And I thought it was fine.
Yeah, I thought it was fine. At the end of the day, if it's on cable and it's there, I'm watching it, man. It's comic book related, I'm watching it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so that kind of brings me to question 5, and talking about DC. You've seen a ton of success with, Marvel, the MCU, what Disney Plus is doing. You haven't seen that kind of success, on the DC side with the movies. I mean, you've got like spot movies here and there that were pretty good. Or great. Like I love the Snyder cut of the Justice League. I wish they would let that dude do his thing. And the Joker I thought was sick, and that was kind of separate, from, canon. I thought that was great. What do you think DC is missing when it comes to the movies? And I'm hoping with HBO Max that, maybe we see something great out of the DC titles, because I know Peacemaker's getting ready to drop, and
Yep.
I'm expecting something good. Like, what do you think they're missing?
I think they're missing consistency. And me and Matt talk about this all the time. Like, just an example, right? You don't really want to compare Marvel to DC because they're two different companies, two different entities. Marvel, there was a build up to Thanos, right? It was a build up, a slow burn, a cool story. It kept going, and then boom, you finally get him. As opposed to DC, where they just throw you their main villain. It's just like, wow, he's here at the end of the movie. He has a 15-minute fight scene, and that's it. I think DC. Listen, my favorite comic book movie of all time was the first Batman with Jack Nicholson as my Joker. That
Yes,
was
sir.
just iconic comic book movie. It don't get better than that. I could watch that every day of my life. Um, I think the new Batman movie that's going to come out, if they stick to that, that has a dark undertone. It looks very gritty. I think that movie is going to surprise a lot of people. And I think that's going to get a lot of people on the DC bandwagon. And I think all these DC books that are undervalued right now, which shouldn't be, because DC has awesome artwork and such like vintage covers and such a rich history in comic books. All those books you're going to start to see rise after this Batman movie, because I think Robert Pattinson, everyone hated on the casting, right? I think he's going to knock it out of the park.
I do
Colin
too.
Farrell, you can't even recognize. I think that movie is going to blow the doors open for DC. And listen, if they have to hit the reset button right now and just start from there, I think it might be a good idea, and just build off of that, because I think that's my most anticipated movie of 2022 out of everything. And we're talking Doctor Strange and the Marvels and all this stuff. That's what I'm most excited to see.
Yeah, me too, brother. Like I said, and it's I grew up reading a lot of DC. I read Marvel too. I mean, I was a Spider-Man fan, a Hulk fan, and kind of your A-list characters, I guess. But I've always wanted to see something great from DC, and Marvel has done a really nice job. I mean, they've got a good formula, kind of building the universe out the way that they do, and now they're getting ready to do this phase two, and they'll do something similar and build to a big event. I would just love to see that with DC. Now, I got super excited to see the Justice League on screen,
Yep.
for the first time. Like, that made me happy. Even the original cut of the Justice League wasn't great, but it was fine. Again, it was one of those.
Fine.
I'll watch
Yep.
it if it comes on. The Snyder cut was something completely different. I absolutely loved it. And because Darkseid's one of my favorite villains. Like, I
Right.
love
Yep.
Darkseid.
Yeah. And you know what's crazy, man? It's like DC's animation, their animated movies,
Are phenomenal.
phenomenal. And it's so funny because we talk about like the Disney Plus shows. To me, Titans is the best comic book show, live action comic book show that's around right now. Titans is my show. I love that show. I
I do
love the
too.
way it's dark. I love the way it's done. I put it up against any show that Marvel put out. And my all-time favorite cartoon is Batman animated series. That was the greatest depiction of Batman and Bruce Wayne and the Joker was that. I love Two-Face. I love the Riddler in it. I love the Penguin. I would rush home from school just to watch Batman animated series, and I still watch it to this day. And
Were you
DC gets it right there,
They really do, and that's why I can't figure out why it doesn't translate to like the movie screen. When they do that, because the animated stuff is so good. I mean, I've had a ball with HBO Max going back and watching all these old animated shows, and even the movies that they've done. I watched what was it, the Superman Red Sun. Watched it, the other day. Like, I mean, and it's so good, and I just want to see that translated to the big screen so bad.
Yeah, you and me both. I think DC's onto the right foot. I think Black Adam's going to be good.
Yeah,
They're bringing Hawkman in, right? That's an iconic character you
I love
want to see
Hawkman.
on screen. So they have so many good characters. Listen, to me, DC villains squash Marvel villains. I'm a DC villain guy. I love it. I love Two-Face. I love the fact that he was a district attorney. I love the Riddler. If they get this right with this Batman movie, I think DC could move forward and they'll be neck and neck with Marvel, if not past them, because hey, listen, it is what it is. Marvel's more pitched to like, kids. They don't
Sure.
go that that violent route. That's what makes me nervous as a Punisher fan and as a Daredevil fan and any street level hero. Like, how are Disney Plus going to do these guys? Where on the opposite side, you think about Batman. I'm like, oh, I have no worries about DC doing Batman because I watched the trailer and you already know it's going to be good. So that's
Well,
what
no,
kind
and I
of
think
scared.
you make a good point there because Kingpin in Hawkeye was charged up, right? It wasn't the same necessarily as he was on the Netflix series, which was one of my favorites. And the
Right.
Punisher Netflix series is phenomenal. Like, I mean, it's so violent, so dark. And John Barenthal, to me, is the Punisher. Like,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I even go back farther than that. Like Dolph Lundgren, that's my Punisher. That was a gritty movie where, the Punisher faced the Yakuza and he faced the Italian mob at the same time. And he was just, this tough dude. At the end of the movie, he grabs a 13-year-old kid and he goes, if you grow up to be like your father, I'm going to kill you too. And I'm like, oh, that's Frank Castle.
yeah, man.
I caught flack on this on Gary's channel because I didn't like Kingpin's depiction in Hawkeye. I don't think Kingpin should have been getting beat up by Kate Bishop, right? And we go back and forth, all friendly. Oh, he let her, get the best of him, but that's not Kingpin. Kingpin in the comics, he doesn't show weakness; he exposes weakness. So I hope they change that up a little bit because if Kate Bishop is giving this guy the work, then the Punisher and Daredevil are going to give this guy 10 times more work. So I hope that kind of leads to something different, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, man, great conversation on that. So I want to do a little current event with you.
Sure.
And this will be question 6. So we just got the news that CGC is raising prices again. And I just wanted to kind of get your take on it. Like, what do you think about that?
Oh, all right. So I'll go back a little bit. I don't want to make it too long. I was totally against grading comics when it first came out. I was one of those guys.
Well, me too, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I worked at the comic book shop. I'm like, I just want to keep my comic book the way it is. I don't care what grade it is. Like it's my book. It's not going anywhere. But times have changed, right? You got to get stuff slabbed. CGC is my company, right? CGC is my company. I think I don't sell many comic books. I basically hoard and keep everything in my collection that I want to pass on to my son. It pisses me off that they're raising prices because they just raised prices, and it's not like you're getting better, any better service right now. You're still waiting months to get your books back, right? And it's only a matter of time before CBCS starts raising prices too, because they once CGC started with the slow times and raised their prices, you got a percentage of the community that went to CBCS, right? And then what happens when they get bombarded? They have to hire more people. They got to do more stuff. So they're going to raise their prices too. To me as a collector, it just makes me think, okay, it just narrows my books down that I'm going to send to CGC.
Right.
That's the only company I use. If you want to maximize your dollar and your investment, you're going to CGC or CBCS. But I'm a CGC guy. I don't really partake in PGX or EGS. It's just not for me. The labels are cool, but that's where it ends. It just makes me consider what books I'm going to send in now. Any book that's worth it or a book I'm a fan of, I'll pay to get graded. It just sucks, man. They're taking advantage of the collectors. Everything's going up nowadays, from gas,
Right.
oil, all that shit. So it's like, hey, if they're raising prices, they still got me hooked. So it is what it is. I'm just might not send in as much until prices go back down, and we'll see if that happens.
Yeah, and I believe, I was on a show the other night and I was talking about this, and I said, I'm not shocked that the prices went up again. Like, I'm not shocked. I think if you know anything about business, that you saw this coming a mile away for a couple of reasons. One, like you just said it, everything's going up, right?
Right.
Inflation. They're saying they're hiring more people. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I think this recent increase is probably to slow somewhat, the people that are submitting books to them so that they can get caught up. And if they lose a little bit, so be it. The increase in prices is going to make up for that. Do you think, because you said it too, I mean, and you're right, that if you have a CGC book, that's where you get your value. there's more value in having a CGC graded comic. Do you think that the community as a whole, because of this price increase, will push back against that and say, we're not paying that much for CGC books anymore? You know, CBCS is just as good. Or do you think that CGC will be able to hold their place in the market?
I do think they'll be able to hold their place in the market. I think what messed it up for everybody is you have people that are not so much comic book fans that are just coming in as collectors. And and we've seen that during COVID, right? It's factual. You see people that are just, stock market is diving. People want to invest in comic books and sports cards and Pokemon cards. That's why we've seen such a surge in collectibles. I hope that goes away, because what it did for us as comic book fans and comic book collectors is it jacked the prices up for us. It changed the hobby, and it made stuff more, now our wait times are insane, man. Like, you send a book in and you're not getting it back for months. CGC has the signings now. You don't see them at shows anymore. You don't see CBCS at shows anymore. And it takes away, man. So I hope that changes. But like me, we talked about it. I have OCD. Every slab I have is CGC. I just can't throw a CBCS book in there now. It's just not going to happen. You know what I mean?
I feel you. No, yeah, no. And it sucks. And that's what, I was talking about. It does suck, but it just seems to be the way it is right now with everything, not, with comic books, with gas, with groceries, everything seems to be going up. You've got this crazy inflation, and it's really hit the hobby. But I think that you'll see this year, like my bold prediction for 2022 is that you will start to see things stabilize, where I think there's the blue chips are always going to be the blue chips. And I think anything that's, tied around, Disney Plus or even the MCU, hopefully HBO Max with DC, I think you're going to see those increases. And I think there's going to be places to make money for people who buy and sell, books. But I think there'll be a stabilization, because I think a lot of people, like you said, during COVID, that were just that extra disposable income because of all this free money that was coming in. They started investing in this stuff. And hopefully I think you'll see some of that die down and things will stabilize.
Yeah, and it's funny you said that, because COVID hit, right? As a comic book collector, I'm a first responder. I was fortunate to work through COVID every day. So I'm like, oh man, I'm going to get books at steals right now. Like, people are going to just be dishing off their books. Everybody's out of work. I could not have been more wrong. It was everything doubled, if not tripled. I couldn't believe it. It was absolutely insane. I couldn't believe it.
No, absolutely, man. It was crazy. I said the same exact thing. I've really been buying DC keys is what I've been buying.
Because you're a smart man, and that's what you should be buying right now.
Yeah, that's what I've been buying. Just going back and kind of hoarding up on some DC keys. I'll grab a Marvel key here and there if I find something at a decent deal. But yeah, absolutely kind of hoarding up. So that kind of leads me to question 7, which is, we've seen these things, happen. And I think the obvious answer to the question I'm getting ready to ask is that it's gotten more expensive to be in this hobby of ours. But what do you think are some of the other challenges that us as collectors and the community is going to face as we kind of move forward through the next 3-4 years?
I think speculation has changed the game, right? I think that books that were obscure that you would never think about grabbing now are becoming hot. And I think there's a lot of people in the community that hate the speculation aspect of it. Why is this, that? Listen, it makes more people buy books and more people into books and more people reading books and interested in it. So what's wrong with it? Like, the word speculator was almost like a curse word in the community years ago. And there's old school collectors that are like, oh, I don't like this. But what's wrong with, believing in a character coming into the MCU or the DCEU? Listen, it has people out there hunting. And I know store owners hate it too. And I know there's a ton of different types of controversy about them raising prices at the counter, which I firmly don't believe in. If something is, I don't care what business you're in. If there's a price marked on a product and you bring it up to the cash register, that's the price. You know what I mean?
Yes.
If you're a comic book shop owner, you have tools, you have key collector. There's no reason why a book shouldn't pop on there that went up in value, that you go look, hey, Punisher 129 went up this, and you pull it out of your bin and price it right. Now that it's priced right, when the next guy comes and looks at that price, he has nothing to haggle about. Hey, that's the price listed on there. So when you bring a comic book up to the counter and they're like, oh no, I got to look at, it's marked $2, but I got to reprice this. I think that hurts, man, because you want that speculation to drive people into your store to go comic book hunting, because that's the fun part about it for a lot of people. That's the fun part of, I go through every single book, every single issue to see what books I know popped, because you know in your head, you get a visualization on Instagram. You know, you just scroll through Instagram and certain covers and certain issues just stick out in your head. And you're like, oh, hey, let me look at this. Oh, $1. You know what? Let me grab this. So I just hope comic book shops adapt to that. And I think that the hobby's almost at an all-time high, almost where it was in the 90s. And it's being driven by like the MCU and movies and Disney Plus and the DCU and HBO Max and stuff. So I just hope it doesn't sizzle out. I hope the superhero thing doesn't sizzle out on one side, and on the other side, I hope it does, because then it gives guys like us a chance again to
Right.
for comic book collectors just to be into the hobby, you know?
No, absolutely. And one of my biggest, like, I'll get up on my soapbox and yell, is about them changing the prices at the counter, because my LCS does exactly that. They do not. I will sit back in there for hours and dig through box after box after box, and I'll find these and I'll bring them up. Okay, yeah, I'm going to buy these. I found some gold, and then they start pricing everything. Like, I had it out with the owner of my LCS over this very thing, and I was like, "Look, dude, so you're going to charge me for doing your job."
Right. Exactly.
I basically went back and dug through all these, found the books. I'm keeping up on my stuff, and now you're going to charge me for it? Absolutely not. I said, you can keep your books. And then we ended up working out a deal that was fair. But, you know, ever since then, I said, look, man, I'll come in and sort these things for you. That drives me nuts.
Yeah. You know what? And I have an LCS that's awesome, New York Hardcore Comics, and I go to the Spider's Web. And both owners, Debo and Paul, they're great, man. If I pull a book out of the bin, they already know. They're like, oh, I know you pulled something. But it is what it is. They're comic book readers. They're not greedy. You know what I mean? But if you're like we talked about it, Jim, me, Matt, if we own a comic book shop and a book's popped or a book gets hot, we're going to go right to where we know it is in our shop, and we're going to pull that book and throw it on the wall. There's no reason, like, them not doing that is just laziness. Like, you're in a comic book store all day, you do your inventory, you know, you set everybody's what you know, their daily pulls, you do their pull list for them, and then you go, look, hey, you know, this, do your research. You have so many tools between Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. There's no reason why you shouldn't have big keys hidden in your bins and reprice them at the counter.
No, absolutely. No, I really could. I could just go on a complete rant about that because it drives me nuts. It's mind boggling. All right. So question 8. Now we're gonna these last 3 questions are more fun. And you know, just
this
for you,
it's been fun, man.
Yeah. No, well, it's more light, I guess I should say. The questions are a little lighter. So on some of the thumbnails I see for the Defects, you have a Metallica shirt on.
Oh, absolutely.
And I am a massive, massive Metallica fan. Like, I've seen them 20 times in concert. I just saw them this summer. They played 2 shows at Louder Than Life, and I went. Are you a Metallica fan?
I am a huge music fan. I am a huge Metallica fan.
So we can be best friends.
We could be absolutely. I still go to concerts. This last July, I was right in the mosh pit at a Korn concert. I get down. You know, I'm in there rumbling. Love music. Absolutely love music.
Korn played at Louder Than Life. They were actually there the first night. They were the headliner the first night. Jonathan Davis actually had COVID and still crushed it. I mean, just absolutely killed it, man.
Those guys absolutely crush it. And I listen to absolutely everything. Growing up, right? I was born 81, like I said. My mom listened to Motown. My dad was a classic rocker. Zeppelin, Floyd, all that stuff. I'm a mix of both of that.
Oh, me too. No, like my uncle I talked about that went to the flea markets. He loved Motown. Loved it. It's all he played. And so I love Motown. You know, like, I love it. I like everything. Now, are you more of a, like, it's hard to classify my musical interest because I really like everything. Now Metallica is my band. That's, like I said, they're hands down number one, the band for me. What are some other bands for you? Like I know Gary loves Pearl Jam. Like, do you have some other bands that you just love?
Yeah, it's so funny how you said that you're a mix of everything because like my playlist will, go from the Shy Lights to Slipknot.
Yeah.
It's from one song to another.
Yeah.
Now as I get older, I just play music who adapts to the mood that I'm in. If I need to calm down before work, I'll throw on some Motown, you know what I mean? If I know it's gonna be a hectic day and I gotta rock out, it's gonna be some Metallica. But some of my favorite bands, Metallica, um, and it's weird, man, because it's almost like comic books. It's like out, certain albums I like and
Yep.
certain albums that Metallica did I didn't like. I would say my favorite, oh man, my favorite all-time band is probably Guns N' Roses. I think
Love
Axl
GNR.
Rose is a phenomenal songwriter. His range in songs and music is like if you go back and listen to for Destruction and then go listen to Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, it's just so different, man, and so cool. My favorite singer, I have to say Chris Cornell, man. I could listen to that guy's song. I get goosebumps just thinking about him. But yeah, man. And then, I'm from New York, home of hip hop, Biggie, The Lox, Nas, all classics. So I listen to absolutely everything. When I'll go to a Wu-Tang show, I'll go to a Rage Against the Machine show, I'll go see, if there was a Frank Sinatra show. I listen to absolutely everything. The only thing I don't listen to is country. That's the only music I don't listen to is country. Everything else.
See, and where I'm at, and I live in the country, and everybody here listens to country music. I'm kind of like the outlier, that because I like this heavier music. I like a lot of older country. The more of the Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, those kind of cats. I like those. But I'm like you. I was driving over last night. I had to go pick my daughter up from volleyball tryouts, and Notorious was on. And so I had to listen to Biggie all the way over there.
Yeah.
And then coming back, my youngest daughter is the one I had to pick up. She is more like me when it comes to music. She's very eclectic when she, listens to music. She'll drop stuff on me. She dropped a Kiss song on me the other day. I was like, how do you know who Kiss is? Yeah. It's TikTok, apparently. Apparently they play all this cool stuff on TikTok.
I will tell you this. I am really not a fan of music past 2004. I don't listen to stuff nowadays on the radio. I just go, there's so much good stuff going back, to even to the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. All those genres were awesome. It was when music was music, not, someone standing behind a machine making music. So the classic,
brother.
The classic stuff, Gary and Pearl Jam. I love Pearl Jam. Song Black, another song you could listen to over and over again.
Oh yeah.
So I'll listen to, anything that's out there, Marvin Gaye, whatever I'm in the mood for, I bump my beats, man.
Love it. We can definitely hang out. Now get to question 9. We might have a little strife here, so I don't know. We'll see. We'll after this question, we'll see where we get. So I'm told that you are a Scotch drinker, that you enjoy a good glass of Scotch.
Love Scotch. Absolutely love a glass of Scotch every night with my wife.
So being from Kentucky, it's a little bit of an insult because we are the bourbon capital of the world, right? So, and all kidding aside, like I don't even really know what Scotch is, okay? Because we are so ingrained that bourbon is the only thing that you can drink outside of a good cold beer. Like, can you tell me a little bit about like Scotch, like what that is?
Yeah, so Scotch is bourbon from Scotland. Usually it comes from the island of Islay.
Mm-hmm.
What they do is they gather the moss by the sea there and they make their Scotch whiskey. Very similar to bourbon. The only difference is bourbon has a little bit of sweet to it. I love bourbon too. Listen, I'm a big Basil Hayden's guy. I love Booker's, Maker's Mark. If I'm barbecuing, I'm drinking bourbon without a doubt. It's just a different. It's just Scotch from a different area. Same exact whiskey, but just different tastes and different notes and stuff.
Cool.
So it's so funny
because the difference was.
Yeah, it's so funny because I took a class. I took 2 classes in my life that I actually paid attention to, and they weren't math and English. It was cigar smoking and whiskey drinking. So you learn so much on just how to like sip it and taste it and breathe through your nose to get taste notes and stuff like that. It's awesome. Listen,
Wait a
at the
minute.
end
Hold
of
on.
the day,
Hold on. Stop. There's a class about this?
yeah, you could take a whiskey class, and the whiskey class was awesome. The cigar smoking class changed my life.
Really?
Hmm.
I had no idea that like, here we just drink.
Yeah,
It's one of those
no,
we
and that's
just
how.
drink.
Trust me, that's how I was, man. Put a 40 in my hand and it's going down.
Yeah.
But then as I started drinking like whiskey and scotch and bourbon and all this stuff, I Googled more about it. Like, I'd watch a video where a guy's like, oh, I taste hints of cherry and leather. I'm like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Like I want to know what this guy is talking about. And guys that just smell it and they could smell all types of different aromas and stuff. So I actually it was a 2-day class, a beginner's class, but it taught me so much, like how to open it up with water and what type of glass to drink it out of. Each glass does something different. So I'm not a pro, but I know more than I did then, and I enjoy it.
I want to take this class. Like
Oh,
I really enjoy a good bourbon. I would always be up to try a good scotch. Anything like that. I enjoy. So talk to me about the cigars then. Like what was it about the cigar class that changed your life?
all right. So the cigar class, that's a funny story because I was on vacation in the Dominican Republic with my family, and I found this cigar smoking class, and it was at this guy's plantation. And he comes to the hotel, he picks you up, and he takes you back to his place. So right off the bat, my wife's like, "So long, I'm never gonna see you again." And I'm like, like, so be it. So the guy picks me up. He's cool. We go back to his house. He lives on a tobacco plantation. He walks you to the fields. He introduces you to his workers and stuff. He shows you on the tobacco leaf, like the bottom of the plant that doesn't get much sun. That's the wrapper. And he goes through the whole thing. He shows you all the different types of leaves and different plants and the seeds and how it's grown and stuff like that. Then we go back to his apartment, and he has this awesome apartment just set up for smoking cigars. This guy was from Sweden. What he did for a living was he restored maps for museums and stuff. So then we got to talking to comic books a little bit because he was pretty much fascinated how, we, in a sense, restore by pressing and cleaning and stuff. Like I said, his name was Bert. He was like 70. He was married to a 22-year-old
My man.
Haitian model. I'm like, oh, this guy got the life, and all he does is does cigar glasses. He poured me a nice big glass of Mama Juana, which is like a ritual in Dominican Republic. We sat there, we smoked cigars. He told me how to inhale. He watched me smoke, and then he picked apart everything I was doing wrong. And then he showed me, like, you got to pull, exhale. You got to have a little bit go out through your nose. You get taste notes like that. He taught me, ashing and the construction of cigar. It was phenomenal. It was 4 hours of just bullshitting with a cool ass dude that had awesome stories and smoking cigars and drinking and looking at his hot 22-year-old wife.
There you go. That sounds like a pretty good day.
Yeah. It was the best excursion I've ever done on a vacation.
That's awesome, man. All right. No, I love that. That will have to go into my best of 10 questions reel. So that was great. All right. Now, question 10, last question. It's hard to believe it's already question 10. It's the beginning of 2022, and you see a lot of these, people putting lists out like their want list for 2022. Does DaButcha have any books that he's got on or he's on the hunt for this year?
I do. And you know what? I do, but it's sad to say that I probably won't get them because I'm very patient. I want a Daredevil 1 right now.
Yeah.
It's not the time to buy it because it's all-time high. It's only going to get higher. I don't sell many books. I don't sell any of my books that are in my PC. Those are all my grails. What I do is I go out and I hunt for books that other people might want, and I hop on Gary's auction with Matt, and I'll sell those books. And like most collectors out there say, I make the hobby pay for itself. I just can't. Being a dad and a husband, I can't go out and buy a Daredevil 1 right now for $7,000-8,000. I don't think it'd be fair to my family. I don't think it'd be fair to myself. Even though it is an investment, what I will do is wait for all this hype to die down and grab it at a price I could grab it at. Right now, my list right now is all omnibus. I can't wait to read for my omnibus to come out. I'm waiting for Bernie Wright's and Swamp Thing Volume 3, with him and Alan Moore to come out and read all those books. So right now, 2022, while the market is hot, I'll be grabbing my omnis and my figures and my toys and my statues. And I'm a big original art guy. I have a bunch of stuff coming on the way. I love to decorate down here in my cave with original art. I don't like putting up posters I like original stuff done by people in the community. Like, I'll have this wall here, you guys can't see, but I have a Joe Rubenstein Wolverine, which is a great known comic book artist. And then I have my buddy George Wood, who did something for me that looks 10 times better than the Rubenstein, So original art and omnibus for 2022 for me, my man.
I love it, man. That's great. And I do have a follow-up to that, if you don't mind. Something that I haven't gotten into, that I feel like I want to, is omnibuses, which is funny because I read so much. I've just found ways to read digitally, or our local library has a lot of stuff,
There you go.
And I'll run down there and grab a few things to read. Is there a good place to go, like to find find omnibuses at a reasonable price? Because they're pretty expensive.
Yeah, so what you could do is, there's 3 major websites I use. I use In Stock Trade, which is usually half off. I use Cheap Graphic Novels, which is usually half off, and Organic Bookstore, which is, again, usually half off. It depends on the book that you want. Just circle through between those 3 websites and just look for the best deal. But out of those 3 websites, you won't get better deals. And they're so worth it, man. It's like, you have like 1 through 75 all in a book, beautiful art. The pages are nice. And they display nice in wherever you have them on your bookshelf. They look amazing. On the right of me, I have all Marvel. On the left, I have all DC. It's like, encyclopedia of knowledge. Any show that comes out, like we talked about the Moon Knight. All right, time to read the Moon Knight omnibus again, So I think once you buy one, though, Jimmy, be careful, because you're gonna be hooked, man.
Be ate up with it too. That's a problem, because I swear, my wife laughs. She says I'm a 46-year-old child. But I love to collect everything. My big thing right now is, like I was talking about trading cards. I do just the Kentucky guys.
There you go.
Because obviously, Kentucky, we love basketball and now football, because we're actually pretty good. But that's what I collect. And then I love action figures from the 80s. Like when I was growing up, stuff I had, I like to find those, but I'm pretty patient with those. Like, I don't care to look around and look at flea markets and find them reasonable. But omnibuses is something that I was really thinking about jumping into, because I like to read so much that I thought this would be a good way to collect these, and I can come back and read them anytime I want to.
Yep. It's so much fun, man. Like, you could go read any arc you want. They present so nice. They look so nice. And I'm like you. Listen, I'm a sports guy. I collect sports memorabilia. All on this side, I have my Las Vegas Raiders stuff, which is Oakland Raiders stuff, but now it's Las Vegas Raiders. I have my New York Rangers stuff. I have my Yankee stuff. So it's a mix of everything down here. I'm like you. I'm a big kid, man. Any toy I could find. I can't believe what toys are going for now. Like,
I can't either. It's insane.
He-Man toys. It's crazy. I had so many G.I. Joes. Now I see the price of them, and I'm like, oh, God. But just like anything else, man, I compare it to when my old man used to tell me he used to stick Mickey Mantle cards in his bicycle so they would make noise. Right? Yeah, I would twist G.I. Joes so they could spin and kick and break them, and they would fall all apart. So I wish I held on to everything.
Oh, man. Well, I can tell you this right now. We could definitely be pals.
100%, man. Yeah. I got to get you out to Terrificon. Terrificon is the show. Everybody talks. I'm a big con guy. I go to every con. I've been going to New York City Comic Con before the whole YouTube thing, before Instagram. Like, comic shows, I love. You meet people, you BS about comics. It's great. It's nothing but great people. Terrificon, though, that's a 3-day party in a casino where everyone's shopping for comics during the day and everybody's partying for night. So you should think about Terrificon, man.
I may have to hit you up, my friend. I may absolutely have to come and hang out for a minute, man. Look, dude, I appreciate you coming on. I have had an absolute blast. Like, this has been great.
Now, listen, we get you on the Defects with Eva Long.
I'll do it, man. I'll be right there. I'll be right there.
And I appreciate you having me on, man. This is probably the best interview I had, man. You do such a great job on here. I'm so excited to be on here. I was thinking about it all day. Sorry I had to reschedule. I had life come up and this and that. But man, Jimmy, I had a blast with you on here tonight, dude.
Dude, I really appreciate you saying that, because I'm a huge fan of you guys over on the Defects channel. Each one of you for different reasons. And, now that I've actually got to sit down with two of you, I feel pretty lucky. I feel pretty blessed to get to sit down and chop it up with you a bit. So, man, I really appreciate it. Guys, if you're watching this, if you're not following the Defects, go over and sub them up. I'll link everything down below, including Butch's Instagram. Go follow him. He put some sweet, sweet books on there. Pictures of stuff he has. It's a good follow. I don't know what else to say, man. That was phenomenal. This has been 10 Questions.